So here's a helpful hint when cutting wood on a mitre saw. So even with a sharp blade, you can quite often get tear out, which is where the fibres lift up at the back like that. So what we do is get a supporting block that's slightly bigger than the wood itself, slide it up to the blade, and then align your marking, make your cuts, and because the fibres have got support behind them, when they cut they don't tear out in the same way, so you're left with a lot nicer finish. So if you're cutting wood and you get tear out, which is where the fibres of the wood sort of tear off the back, you get a nice uneven finish there, then the trick to do is just to score it with a Stanley blade, and that severs the wood fibres so it doesn't allow that to happen when it's cut. And just by doing something simple like this as a way of marking your wood and also severing the fibres, when you make the cut, what you'll see is that the end result, there's no tear out at all, and look at that crisp line. Perfect. Give it a go. So let's say you've made your cut and you want to slot it in between two other pieces of wood, and you find that your measurement is ever so slightly, just a tiny bit too big for it to fit in. I'm going to show you a quick way on making that easy with a mitre saw, to just shave off a tiny little bit, one piece at a time. So what we do is we take our piece, bring our saw down all the way, and then we butt our piece of wood up against the saw, okay? And once that's done, you just hold it there. Don't put too much pressure against the saw. You just want to hold it in place, and then if you turn it on and bring the saw up like this, the only bit that you're shaving off is the distance from the flat part of the blade to where the teeth are. So in this instance, it's less than 0.5 millimetre. So if we just come down, just butt it up to here, so it's nice and flat and smooth against here. Turn the saw on and just bring the saw up slowly. So now don't put too much pressure against the saw, otherwise what can happen is as the saw comes up, it can release stress on the metal of the blade, and it can create a bowed cut. So just be careful with that. Only just put a tiny bit of pressure and hold it still. Just like that. And you can do this as many times as you want to get that perfect fit. Oakley dokley. This is a friendly tip on setting up a stop block with your mitre saw so you can make repeatable cuts, and this is a method on preventing the accumulation of sawdust in the bottom corner where your stop block is, just here. So one thing that you'll find is when you've made a few cuts and you've got some sawdust on the bed of your mitre saw, when you butt up your wood, gradually it will get to the stage where you've got a gap, which will obviously create inconsistencies in your cut. So there's one thing that we can do about that. So if we get our stop block, and if we cut a 45-degree angle on it, but not too much, because you want to make sure that your piece that you're cutting doesn't slip underneath there, and you'll see here that when you actually butt it up, that sawdust gets pushed underneath. I hope this helps. Here's a cheeky way of getting a more precise cut with your bandsaw. So, like normal, you would start your cut and try and steer clear of your line as close as possible. As you can see, I've got up to 1 millimetre here. You can use the kerf of your saw blade to drag the workpiece towards you and just take that tiny little piece off at a time, and you're able to get much closer to your mark. Pow! In this video, I'm going to show you the difference between a homemade push stick and one that typically comes with your table saw. So what you have with this one is, these are the ones that are manufactured that typically come with table saws. What you have is a single point of pressure that comes from the back, and there is one pro in comparison, is that it keeps your hand further away from the blade as it's rotating. However, what it does, it also pushes from just the back, and it can allow for there to be a bit of movement in the wood. So I personally don't use these. For me, they're not as safe as a homemade one, for example. Now this is just an offcut of ply. It's just a quick and easy 2-minute job to do. One thing that is important is having this little hook at the back here. So what that does is that pushes from the back of the wood, and then that acts as a fulcrum. So your pressure is downwards about 8 inches forwards. So what happens is, as you're pushing it forwards, you've got downwards pressure. So you see it actually forces the wood down. So it's got a lot more control. And providing that when you set your blade height, you set it to just about 1 millimetre or 2 above your material. If you pass over with this, it's perfectly safe because you've got at least 2 inches away from the blade, plus however you choose to do the handle. So the important thing is having a nice flat surface here and a hook on the back here. So you can do your handle however you want. You could